welcome to today's B4 Business Brunch. Today we'll be discussing the joys of being a working parent during this lockdown period. My name's Jessica Mason and I am the Commercial Manager of Chapman Robinson & Moore Accountants based in Kidlington in Oxford. And I'd like to introduce my guests here today. We'd like to start with Nicola. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So my name's Nicola Wallbank and I'm an employment solicitor based at Julian Taylor Solicitors in Oxfordshire. We're employment advisors. And I'm also a mum to two primary school aged children. So yeah, I feel like I'm well qualified to join in this discussion today.
And Kat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jessica. I'm Kat. I work as CRM, an accountant. And yes, I think I qualify well too. I've got one secondary and one primary school children. Thank you.
And Howard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Howard Feather. I'm the local business growth enabler from NatWest. And I'm not sure whether I do qualify, but I have got one nursery child and one primary school. So I've got a little girl and a little boy.
Thank you, Howard. So I'm going to kick things off here. I too am a working parent. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So one at preschool age, one in sort of year 1 at primary school. And I was thinking about the topics we could discuss today. And actually, I think there's so much we could cover. I mean, the last 12 months have been absolutely sort of chaotic, trying to balance that going to work, the homeschooling, trying to be a parent as well, doing the normal household chores, or possibly, doing this primarily from home in the same working space. I mean, how has everyone else been finding it?
Yeah, it's definitely been a juggle, hasn't it? I've been working throughout, trying to perhaps just use the odd day of holiday to sort of break things up occasionally where there's a need for a little bit of sort of diluting everything that's going on. And yeah, generally it's been a case of sort of taking one day at a time. I think if at any point I look too far down the road, it would start to get a bit overwhelming. So it's just a case of muddling through. I think I'm also quite lucky that my husband has also been working from home. And so I think mostly we've worked as a fairly good team and have been able to sort of communicate with each other. And if one of us is having a particularly heavy meeting day or something like that, we've been able to say, oh, I'm sort of going to have to be out of the picture and focused on work on that particular day, and we've sort of been able to cover each other like that. So that's been very good. I do feel for people who've been sort of doing it more on their own, for sure.
Definitely. And Kat, how have you been finding it? Because you've got a secondary school age child as well, so I think for them being a little bit older is, I think, some way tougher. I don't know.
I think in my case, definitely, I think it was easier because I really feel for parents with more than one little one. With secondary school, our school was amazing the way they set up all the homeschooling. So I was hardly ever needed by my older daughter. So it was more concentrating on entertaining the little one.
And how have you been finding it the last sort of 12 months? Have you sort of been able to get your work-life balance sorted, or have you still been struggling?
Very different. Sorry.
Don't worry. So I built an office. I actually converted half my garage because I needed to escape.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't concentrate and look after the children at the same time. So me and my wife have tag teamed it a lot more. And we're shift workers and passing ships. But yes, so I've built an office to keep work separate from life and life separate from work still, because that's the way that I've had to work.
It's interesting you say that, Howard, because I know people who've taken that approach as well and have sort of done it in shifts. But that really involved somebody having to get up at some ridiculous time of the morning, and neither of us were really prepared to hand up for that. So yeah, we never sort of got that cracked. But yeah, hats off if you managed to do that.
My wife pulled the short straw.
Okay.
We took it in turns, and it's also, I think, through the trial or through the year, the trials from school have changed. First lockdown, I found from school less supported, and I think that they were surprised like everybody else. And that kind of left a little bit more of a free run. We had a bandwidth problem because my children were in front of more screens. and that was a different problem. But then second lockdown, school got a lot more involved. And this lockdown, if anything, maybe the demands from school have been a bit higher because they are really ready for it. I don't know how you felt, but I certainly feel very structured.
Similar. Yes, the both two lockdowns were very different. Sorry, Howard.
I think this time round, like you say, the school have been more prepared. So we have had more of the online learning, which is great, but it also absorbs a lot of your time. So you can't sit there, especially with the little ones, you can't sit there sort of trying to get on with your work and trying to sort of speak about like phonics and halving and doubling, which is whatever we've been doing, and trying to teach them. So I found that my attention has had to be more focused on the homeschooling this time, rather than just giving them a worksheet or whatever, or just saying, oh, you do this or do some colouring, or but I think and I agree, Howard, having that separate space, I mean, that's what we did. I think a lot of people did build a separate area that you can go to and try and escape. But I think the other thing that I've been struggling with is actually having, if you're in it with a partner, is having to spend that, having that time to spend as a wife as well. For me, you can't go out for dinner, and your time's absorbed by being a parent and working at the moment. So I mean, he might be quite pleased with that, you never know.
I think as well the key, because what you were just saying about the differences between the two lockdowns, and lockdown 1 versus lockdown 3, and how the schools have really sort of rallied and produced lots of resources. I think that how you feel about that reflects your own family your own family relationships and your children, and how they learn, and what you're engaged with in your job as well. Because some people I know really preferred the sort of more unstructured unstructured stance of lockdown 1, and enjoyed the sort of flexibility that gave them, and the freedom to kind of make up their own things as they went along. And other people, probably me included, prefer the structure, and actually my children are, bless them, very, very, very good, and sort of they seem to like the structure as well. And so it kind of suits us all more to be able to kind of say, okay, right, now you're doing this and now you're doing that, and that's really helped us. But for sure that doesn't work for everybody, and I think different people have found different challenges at different times, haven't they? But I know we'll all be delighted that there seems to be an end in sight, definitely.
I know. So that was good. I was just going to lead on to that actually, with the announcement on Monday, literally cheerleading pom-poms, like crack open the champagne. But which is great, but there's still going to be some challenges ahead for working parents. We're still going to have some problems ahead. I mean, prior to Christmas, we had the issue in our particular case where the children had to self-isolate. So we're still going to be under pressure there with the isolation cases. Children's behaviour, I mean, they've been, these poor kids have been sort of pulled through the mill a little bit. So if you're at school, you're not at school. Now you've got to stay in all the time because you're having to isolate. You can't even go for a walk. There's been a lot going on. So it's how they're going to react to that change. Hopefully it will tire them out going back to school as well. So some stimulation there. So, but yeah, so what are your thoughts and feelings about sort of the weeks ahead then?
So much. And isolation, when we're talking about isolation, it will be 10 days, I think. Is it 10? So yeah. Compared to 2 months, I think we can do it.
And then with regards to sort of employers support as well. I mean, Nicola, I think I was going to sort of come to you. I mean, Kat and myself work for a slightly smaller firm, and they've been great and flexible and sort of letting us work when we can, no pressure there. And I think that's a huge benefit that we've had in the last few months. I didn't know if you had sort of input from, or even Howard actually to begin with, but working from a bigger firm, if they've been, obviously a nationwide bank is.
Yeah, so it's been a trying year, I won't lie. We mobilised 49,000 people to work from home in under 2 weeks, which is huge. And actually, I think as the bigger organisations look back on the year, they should be really proud of what they have done, because obviously, as a primarily customer-facing industry, to make sure that we don't disappear just because people don't have work at home equipment is not acceptable, because that obviously has a knock-on effect. So I think we should be really proud of what we've done. And then as the year has progressed, I think the realization of how long this will be happening. I certainly remember lockdown one where I said, oh, it'll only be for a couple of weeks. So I just swept a desk aside and I'll plant myself here for a couple of weeks. That's fine. After a couple of weeks, I realized, oh, this isn't going to work. So I had to rearrange that room because it looked like it's going to be another month. And then I built the office because I said, I'm going to be here for a while. But I think the companies had the same approach where, right, we need to get technology to everyone so they can do something. Then about a month or two later, we started getting the dual screens in so people's setups were right. Then the desks arrived, then the chairs arrived, because so it's been a constant journey, but absolutely in the right way. Let's fix the most important one straight away. We need people to be able to work. Actually, this is going to be longer than we were expecting. Now we need to be able to make sure that we're looking after them and preparing. So lots of well-being courses are being thrown on virtually and things like that. So actually, it's a huge focus. And randomly, our teams have got closer. So as most of you know, my team covers the whole of the Southwest. There's 14 of us that look after everything from Surrey down to Cornwall and to North Wales. So we don't get to see each other very often, but we now see each other 3 or 4 times a week. I know more about my colleagues during lockdown than I've ever done before. So there are some huge positives about that concern of actually, let's look after everybody. Let's make sure that we have time together. We've done more team building exercises. So we've done litter picks across the territory together. We've done team meetings in idyllic places. I was up in the clumps, getting attacked by some cows. That was quite fun. But we've had to think a lot more, but it's been very much people focused, which I think sometimes people get surprised at, that the big companies still do that, because there is a reputation for actually it's the bottom line. But no, I've got to sing some praises, and they've done really well.
And I just wanted your input then from sort of the HR point of view, and what employees can maybe, if they are still, because working parents, well, not just working parents, but we are going to struggle in the months ahead. It's not going to be a sort of come 8th of March, yeah, we're free. It's a gradual process, and there's still going to be some employees struggling, and what, from an employee, what can they do, and then maybe employers as well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm like you. I work in a relatively small working environment, and everything's been pretty flexible from my perspective. So I've been lucky with that. Also, just want to say, as Howard just said, it's amazing what some big employers achieved in such a small space of time. I think lots of employers had on their agenda that looking at their agile working policies, and it was the sort of thing that was on the list and was sort of subject to going through lots of committees and being approved and all sorts of things, and then suddenly everybody had to do it and scrambled, and it's amazing what can be achieved in a short space of time if you have to do it. So yeah, I've seen that too in my clients. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, Jessica, about what is open and available to employees, and what should employers be looking out for. So I suppose the default in normal times, if we can remember that, is that usually employers shouldn't expect employees to be looking after their children at the same time as doing their jobs, but clearly everybody's had to be much more pragmatic about that, and we've all just adjusted, and we've all kind of seen the human side of each other, haven't we? And I think everybody's become a little bit more accepting that actually we're not just these sort of working people who appear at work and leave everything behind us, and we can't sort of divide our lives up like that. Everything's become a bit more blurred, and employers have had to recognise that people come with what's going on at home too. That's a good thing, and I think that's that human side of the employment relationship is fundamental and really important. And there is some ACAS guidance on working from home, which suggests a number of different things that employers and employees should be looking at if there is a bit of a need to improve flexibility. So it looks at agreeing different working hours, agreeing that employees don't have to work for a full week or a full working day, so adjusting hours, reducing targets. That's another one, not putting the pressure on in terms of targets, and seeing if you can agree some sort of compromise over that, if there are periods where parents are facing particular pressures. And not just parents, this is carers as well, who perhaps care for elderly relatives too. It's important to say that, I think. And I think maybe also looking at flexibility on deadlines and that sort of thing, and just being realistic. So that's sort of pragmatic suggestions for how the parties can agree between themselves something that is sensible and workable. There are also sort of more structured things in the sort of armoury of what employees are entitled to and can ask for. There is a statutory right to assert time off to care for dependents. That's an unpaid right to take a reasonable amount of unpaid time off to take necessary action to deal with certain events impacting upon your dependents. So if you have a child who suddenly falls ill and you need to take some time off to put in place some sort of caring arrangements for that child, then that is covered by this statutory right to take emergency time off. Or indeed unexpected disruption in arrangements for care. So if the school suddenly closes and you need to sort of go and collect your child and work out how you're going to muddle through the next couple of weeks, then you might find that employees are making requests for time off to care for dependents. But it is unpaid time off. Some employers will supplement that pay and pay anyway, but it's an unpaid statutory right. So there is that. There is also furlough. I mean, originally it wasn't clear whether you could furlough staff who were needing to take time out to support their children with their home learning, but following the third lockdown on the 5th of January, there was this clarification that yes, if an employee needs to take time off because of school closures that have happened as a result of COVID-19, then furlough is available. And so whilst it hasn't ever been compulsory for employers to furlough staff, the guidance on this, the employees' guidance, does encourage staff to talk to their employers about that and say, will you put me on furlough? And that is something that people have made use of and indeed may continue to make use of in due course to cope with school closures and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's something that can be utilised. And then there's also other forms of leave, holiday. I mean, I think I said at the beginning that I've personally been taking the odd day of holiday just to kind of break things up and give us as a family a little bit more space. And that's something that can be utilised. And I think as well, some people have been backing up holiday and sort of keeping it because they think, oh, I'm going to save it until I can go away. But there is a well-being issue there too, isn't there? That actually there's something to be said for people just taking a bit of time out, even if you can't go anywhere exciting, just to take the pressure off. So there's using holiday. And there are other rights to things like unpaid parental leave as well, where employees can take up to 4 weeks unpaid leave per year in blocks of a week in order to care for their children. But you do need to give 21 days notice of wanting to take that sort of leave. So it's not the kind of thing that you can do just to react to something that has happened. So there are kind of tools, but I think the key thing with all of this is it's dialogue and communication between an employee and an employer, because if you stop talking to each other, that's when communication breakdown happens. I think it's if you're struggling, talk to your employer, and between you, try and come up with a solution that works, maybe using some or one or more of those tools.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we've been very fortunate that at Champ Romsden Moor, they've been really supportive of that. And if something's cropped up sort of last minute, they've allowed us to have that time off and just work when we can, which has been really good and a massive ease of pressure there. But like you say, I found myself doing that, storing up my annual leave, and then I'm like, I can't actually go. My holiday's been cancelled, I think, for the third time. So we're definitely not going away again. So I think we just sort of decided to knock that on the head, and I'll be using that over the holidays, I think. So
yeah, and that's the other thing is, while schools are reopening, it's and they have said as well after school clubs too, haven't they? I think a lot of the other sort of extracurricular stuff that our kids have always done and that we've kind of banked on for a bit of extra childcare here and there and to sort of make life work may not be opening straight away, and so there's still going to be pressures, aren't there?
And I still think as well is and I found that in this situation I found actually guilty if I want to spend some time to myself. So I mean, there's no harm in taking a day's holiday, you know, once they're back at school, and just having some time to yourself, which I'm really missing. Just go for a run, or guilt-free, not sort of having to think, oh, I shouldn't really be using this time for this. I should be doing it for homeschooling, or to do my housework, or to do, to work. I mean, to take that time out just to do something you really enjoy, if it's a hobby or whatever. I think that's really important at the moment.
That's something both me and my wife have built into our daily routine. So my wife goes for a run most mornings. Absolutely amazing how fast she can run away, but then she has to come back. But I've also got the rowing machine in the garage, and I've been doing multiple challenges throughout the last year. So we both try and take 45 minutes to an hour every day, where we just go into our zones and disappear. And kind of leave everybody else behind, like you say, just to clear your head, because it is massively important. And I think we certainly early on in the first lockdown we didn't do that, and that's where other things come into mind. As I'm sure most of you saw my post the other day about being a hunk, a drunk, or a chunk. I think that certainly in the first lockdown, comfort eating was something I did, and I'm sure I wasn't alone with the occasional beverage before midday.
Oh yeah, certainly. The gin, I mean, the multiple bottles of gin, sneakily taking the bottles to the bottom back. But this time we've actually been very good, and not
you used to have to time it with the Thursday night clap, didn't you? If you emptied the bins at the same time, it was not quite so noticeable.
And who's going back to the office? Like when you can, are you going to be staying working from home, or are you going to be going back to the office?
Going to go back.
Yes, office.
Yes. Unanimous.
But so we're coming towards the end of our discussion now, and one of the things I did want to touch on, I think it's going to follow up in an article, is some top tips. I mean, a friend of mine works for adult mental health, and they've been inundated at the moment with the support that they've been providing across Oxfordshire, and there's some tips there that she's given, and part of that is keeping active. Other things is actually giving sort of maybe volunteering some time to pop round to a neighbour, just knock on the door, check everything's okay, and there's lots of different little tips and things, and I found it really useful to read, so I'll share that later on today. And also some people on Instagram, some influencers actually, that have got some really good techniques and stuff, so I'll share that also. So yeah, but thank you everyone for your time, and if there's anything else you'd like to share, any top tips or anything, please do now. But if not, we'll wrap things up and say thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us.